Hello everyone, our work's name is Spatiotemporal Self-supervised Learning for Point Clouds in the Wild. Training a semantic segmentation network for point cloud requires large amounts of annotated data. But annotating is highly cost. It only takes 0.05 seconds for LiDAR to collect a frame of point cloud, but how long does it take to label a frame of point cloud? Average 22 minutes. So, there is an urgent need for self-supervised learning methods to improve the effectiveness of data and reduce annotation costs. Based on this, we propose a new self-supervised learning method called STSSL. Our STSSL uses unlabeled raw point cloud data as input to pre-train a model, which is cost-effective. At the same time, our method fully explores the spatiotemporal information of point cloud, enabling the pre-trained model to perform significantly better. The key to SSL is to construct appropriate positive samples. The existing methods perform SSL at different features levels. Given a point cloud frame, point contrast performs on point level features by extracting point-wise features. Seg contrast further apply cluster-wise pooling to generate cluster-wise features. Depth contrast and STRL pooling all point features to obtain scene features. They take different level features as positive samples. At the same time, the positive samples may come from a single frame of multiple frames. Since there are differences choices in existing methods, we have two questions. First, which level of feature representation are better for semantic segmentation? Second, do we need to construct positive samples from multiple frames? Let's take a look at the question 1 first. Seg contrast and depth contrast take clusters or scenes instance as positive samples. They aggregated spatial information of a region during pre-training, but lacked constraints on the features of each point. We use a seg contrast pre-trained model to extract features for a point cloud frame and use k-means to cluster these features. We visualize the points by coloring them according to the clusters, which means points with the same color are adjacent in feature space. The figure shows that colors in one object are divided into different colors. This indicates that the points from the same category can be distant in the learned feature space. Based on this observation, we propose to use point and corresponding cluster as positive samples, which is called P2C. We also use a P2C pre-trained model to extract features for a point cloud frame and visualize it. As shown in figure, P2C yields features such that most of the car points are in the same cluster, thus indicating that the features are more representative of the object instances. Let's take a look at the question 2 now. To answer this question, we first need to understand another one: what is the role of data augmentation in self-supervised learning? Paper 5 proposes that data augmentation is used to generate diverse positive samples for intraclass instance. By aligning similar positive samples, self-supervised learning can construct a structured feature embedding. Does data augmentation work well in point cloud? No. Data augmentation usually compose of random crop, random cuboid drop, and so on. We applied them to frames N and M and found it did not generate diverse positive samples. We guess it may be better to apply data augmentation to objects instead of whole point cloud. But it still fails. We found that the main source of difference between the two instance point clouds arises from the different illumination angles as shown in the right figure. Such differences cannot be simulated by data augmentation and will lead to confusion when the model predicts semantic labels. Since the data augmentation is not working and cannot work as a ladder, can we directly align the original sample? Yes. Since the LiDAR is moving in the scene, tracking an arbitrary object in multiple frames can obtain its appearances under different illumination angles. We track, associate, and collect appearances from objects in time sequences. And then, we take associated cluster from multiple frames as positive samples and minimize the distance between them. We render the points in the same feature cluster with the same color. Our method pre-trained model extracts similar features for cars under different illumination angles. But seg contrast with no temporal information cannot. So, we think it is needed to construct positive samples from multiple frames. After answering the two questions before, we propose appropriate positive samples. First, point and corresponding cluster features are better positive samples since its constraints both on clusters and points features. The model pre-trained using them as positive samples satisfies the common principle that points on the same object have similar features and semantics. Second, associated cluster features from multiple frames should be positive samples to eliminate confusion caused by illumination angles. This figure shows an overview of our method and how it effectively explores the spatiotemporal information of point cloud data. Here is the pipeline of our STSSL. Given a sequence of LiDAR point clouds, we first perform clustering and unsupervised tracking to associate clusters in different frames. At each training iteration, we select two frames M and N. The interval between M and N is gradually increased to benefit from different time interval. Then we apply augmentations to generate two views for each frame, and extract features for each point and pooling point features to obtain cluster features. Then, we minimize the distance between the point features and the corresponding cluster features from a single frame, and distance between the cluster features obtained from associated clusters in multiple frames. We first fine-tune the model pre-trained on Kitty to semantic Kitty. In this table, we show per class IOU. In most classes, STSSL performs better than other methods except for class poles, because the pole is a cylinder and is almost unaffected by the angle of illumination. This result corresponds to our motivation, which is that illumination angles are important reasons for the different appearances of one object. Then we evaluate effectiveness and transferability of STSSL. Left table shows that our method outperforms the baselines by an impressive margin. At the same time, when preforming pre-training and fine-tuning on different datasets, STSSL performs good. In order to prove the effectiveness of our point-to-cluster instance samples, we only use point-to-cluster loss function for experiments, which means the difference between methods are only instance samples. We dub this setting P2C. Table above shows that our proposed P2C pre-training method achieves better results than other methods. To demonstrate the effectiveness of temporal information, we add a new stage after the original seg contrast, in which we activate our interframe loss function, as in our method. With temporal information, seg contrast inter performs better than vanilla seg contrast. We have also conducted many other meaningful experiments, and detailed content can be found in our paper. Thank you. Here is the QR code of our project homepage.